I'll begin by just stating the obvious. Welcome to Portland State University's Hatfield School of Government and the Downtown Neighborhood Association's first candidate forum. And as all of you are experiencing today, it's our first, but we trust we'll work through everything and the next iterations will be much better. So thank you all for your patience to begin. Thank you for joining us for today's candidate forum, and a warm welcome to those of you joining us in person here at the University Hotel and Convention Center and at Portland State University, and to all of you watching this forum online. My name is Keith Wilson and I'll be your moderator. Our sponsor for today's forum are Neighbors West Northwest Coalition, the Portland State University Hatfield School of Government, the Downtown Neighborhood Association, and the Pearl District Neighborhood Association. Our media partner who will be producing and streaming today's program is Open Signal. A special thanks to Darlene Garrett, the Executive Director of Neighbors West Northwest Review, the Executive Director for their review board, and to Laurel Singer, the Interim Director of Portland State University Hatfield School of Government, and her entire team for providing support for this wonderful venue. And this is a real comment to the candidates in your teams. Thank you for their outstanding help this last several weeks to produce this and for their efforts. We owe them a debt of gratitude, but we also want to just simply say thank you to them. They are the backbone of our democracy, and I know that they're the unsung heroes that you often want to call out and give them a thank you. So I just wanted to take that quick moment. We're going to dispense with introductions in the hopes that our audience by this time has become well acquainted with you. In place of introductions, the following brief was submitted by the Hatfield School of Government to frame the relationship between the county and the city of Portland to outline mission, overlaps, and joint responsibilities. In summary, Multnomah County, a jurisdiction with 810,000 citizens, which includes the city of Portland, provides social services for the entire county and cities within its limits. Services include health, addiction, mental health, aging, community justice, jails, collecting taxes, conducting elections, and maintaining and managing libraries and bridges. In the unincorporated areas, the county provides land use, sheriff, and transportation services. Multnomah County is governed by 4 commissioners elected by district with only legislative authority, with the county chair elected county-wide, administering the county as CEO. Today, we're hosting the finalists from the May primary for county chair, Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson and Commissioner Sharon Myron, who will be with us in a few moments. After the election, the winner will be elected the county chair. The other will remain commissioner with 2 years remaining on their term. The city of Portland, a jurisdiction within Multnomah County and with 650,000 citizens, provides urban services within the city boundaries, including police, fire, land use, building codes, affordable housing, parks, transportation, and economic development support. The city of Portland is governed by 4 elected councilors elected citywide who have both legislative and administrative roles, and the mayor who assigns departments to council members and leads the council. Today, we are hosting the finalists from the May primary for the city of Portland, position number 3, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty and her challenger Renee Gonzalez. The city of Portland and Multnomah County jointly address homelessness through the Joint Office of Homeless Services and coordinates public safety services. Welcome to the candidates, and thank you so much for being here on such a beautiful day. Our theme for today is collaboration to address shared challenges. 3 of the 4 of you will be working in some capacity in January. Of the 2 county commissioners, 1 of you will become the chair, the CEO of our county. The other will remain a commissioner. Of the 2 city council candidates here today, 1 of you will begin your term in January and work with these 2 commissioners to lead our region. The challenges in our community are so big and the suffering so great that this forum was designed to bring the candidates together to help break down barriers that may exist between each of you and your jurisdictions to improve communication and understanding, to find shared commonality so you can tackle and overcome these challenges together. This is not a time for a hero. You will need one another. The format for the next 90 to 120 minutes will have the candidates begin with an opening statement, answer 8 questions, and then end with a closing statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for each segment and answer. The key topics for today are unsheltered homelessness, behavioral health, and crime. I should point out that from this point forward, You have all agreed to be addressed by your first name, so thank you for that. The order of who begins will start from left to right, and then alternate between county and city, and then alternate between candidates, and I've already assured the candidates I got this covered. So PSU has provided timekeeper. Thank you, Lucia and Khadijah. And candidates, we ask that you observe those limits and be respectful to one another's time. We ask that the audience refrains from clapping and shout-outs and, as earlier noted, singing and dancing. So it is a wonderful day, a wonderful event, and I perfectly understand. But let's make sure we give the candidates respect to get to their answers, and really let's focus on the meat of the matter. All right, then. Let's go ahead and move on to opening statements. To that, we will begin left, or stage left to right. Jessica, Commissioner Peterson, we will begin with you, move to you, Commissioner Hardesty, and then finish with you, Mr. Gonzalez. Please.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes? Okay, great. My name is Jessica Vega Peterson. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you so much to PSU, to the neighborhood associations for bringing us together today and having this forum. It's a privilege to be at your very first one. So my family and I have lived in East Portland for the past 17 years. We have been in the same house on the same block in a rapidly changing community. East Portlanders were the frontline workers who came to work every day during COVID. We have experienced some of the highest levels of gun violence and traffic fatalities in the county, and we do this while living in a part of the city that's ignored and underinvested. I ran my first campaign for state rep because of this inequity, on the lack of sidewalks and opportunities for my community. People came together to support me, and we got sidewalks and a whole lot more for the people of East Portland and Oregon. I have the experience, the record of accomplishment, and the vision to meet this unprecedented movement and lead Multnomah County in the right direction. I bring people together to get big things done. That's why I have the broadest and deepest coalition of organizations and community leaders in this race who know I am the best person to lead Multnomah County forward. Sharon likes to say I will be 4 more years of the status quo. I am not and have never been part of the status quo. My track record as an elected official is hallmarked by my success in breaking new ground since my first day in office. As Oregon's first Latina representative, I passed the Coal to Clean bill, a first in the nation law to transition off of coal-fired power. At the county, I started the practice of bringing business leaders, community members, and schools together to engage deeply to successfully site shelters in neighborhoods. And I led the work on Preschool for All, which has set a national model for universal quality preschool. This is an inflection point from our homelessness crisis to combating climate change to increasing community safety and addressing systemic racism. We need a county chair who is a leader and can bring people together. That is exactly who I am, and that is why voters should choose me as the next Multnomah County chair.
Thank you, Vega Peterson. I appreciate it. And welcome, Commissioner Myron. Commissioner, you have a microphone there. Can we get a quick test on that?
I think. Hello?
You can use it. Do you want to use mine?
Oh, yes, thank you.
You have 2 minutes for opening remarks anytime you're ready.
Thank you. I'm Sharon Myron. I am a Multnomah County Commissioner. I am an emergency room doctor. I am a lawyer, and I volunteer with Portland Street Medicine, providing care to people who are the most vulnerable on our streets. I'm running for county. Initially, I ran for county really because the work of the county is my passion. It is my life's work. It is a public health and public service mission for me. A lot of people don't know what the county does. You can be forgiven for that, but the county does primarily health and human services. We provide homeless services, mental health and addiction services. We provide public health services, domestic violence services. And the role of chair is really important in this context. The chair is a CEO. She is the executive setting a $3.3 billion budget. She hires and oversees people who are the heads of all of our departments, and she is the gatekeeper for information. The chair truly sets the vision and direction of the county. I disagree with the direction that we are going. And you don't need to look far to see where we are going wrong. We have people living in literal squalor on our streets. And I see this directly as a volunteer with Portland Street Medicine. We have people taken to jail instead of treatment who are in mental health and addictions crisis. We have escalating gun violence on our streets. And instead of just digging deep, really 15 seconds, seriously, we are just doing the same old thing with talking points, with platitudes, and that is what my fellow commissioner is speaking to as plans for the future. I will bring accountability, action, the view of an ER doctor to this position, and I look forward to being your next county chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. I appreciate it. We're going to move on to the City of Portland, and I welcome your response, your opening statement, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you very much. And thank each of you for being inside on the most beautiful day we've had in some time. So why am I running for re-election? Let me first tell you, I am a proud U.S. Navy vet. I served in the Oregon legislature for 3 terms with a 100% voting record with labor. I have been on the city council 3 years and 9 months. And when my opponent tells you that I'm responsible for everything wrong with the city of Portland, I want you to do your homework. I, in my very first term, changed a system that hadn't changed in over 100 years. And that is our first responder system. Portland Street Response came about because when I ran for office in 2018, I asked the question, people who are in mental health crises should not die on our street. Clearly, there must be a better responder to address people in crisis. And that was how Portland Street Response was born. My opponent will tell you that I can't get along with anybody. However, every single one of our congressional delegation have put their weight behind my reelection campaign. They will tell you that I don't like police. I will tell you that I have personally worked with 16 police chiefs and 6 police commissioners. Some were better than others. They will tell you that I don't know how to get things done. I promised voters that I would pass a ballot measure to create a police oversight board. I told them I would go to Salem and get the law changed so that board could operate. And I told them I would negotiate a new police contract with clear discipline standards in it. I did all that. You name one other elected leader that has got as much done in 1 term in office as me, but yet my opponent would like you to believe because I ask direct questions, because I address racial inequality, because I ask who benefits from public dollars, because I ask where do workers live when we're pricing them out of the city of Portland. My opponent wants you to think I don't get along. I get along just fine.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Mr. Gonzalez?
Well, thank you all for coming out today, and thank you to PSU and the group for hosting today. Sorry I delayed us a little bit on the start. I was responsible for my daughter's transportation to school dance, and hell knows no fury like a Latina late for a dance. So just apologize on that. I'm running because I'm very deeply concerned about the direction of our city. I'm a 5th generation Portlander on my maternal side. I'm also a son of a migrant Latino worker and from South Texas. I'm from 2 worlds and have loved raising my children here, all 3 born and raised in the city of Portland. But as we looked out at our city, as we emerged from the pandemic, became very, very concerned about its direction and really feel, as was alluded to earlier, we're at an inflection point, particularly in terms of our ability and really inability to address the chaos on our streets, the crime, and the confounding challenges of the unsheltered. So I'd like to lead in a data-driven way, really look at the underlying causes of both crime and the unsheltered, not speak in terms of ideology, not talk in terms of big ideas all the time, keeping it simple, focus on the data. Fundamentally, we need more police on our streets. We need a criminal justice system that's more focused on the victim and the concept of justice. With respect to our unsheltered, we need to build more shelter And at the same time, we've got to be very, very focused on getting much needed addiction services rolled out in Multnomah County and in the city. We also need to be strong advocates for strong mental health in the state. The city often bears the brunt when we don't succeed there. Even though the city doesn't necessarily have the ability to fix it, we can be loud advocates for that. Last but not least, I'm very well supported by the men and women who work with their hands, work with their backs, supported by a number of trade unions throughout the city. I'm also supported by the men and women who protect you, fire, police. So I just would love to have you join my coalition as we look to restore the city. Thank you. Look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. We're going to move on to the questions that we've collected from the neighbors. The question committee received questions from the 13 Northwest, Southwest, and Downtown Portland neighborhood associations and area businesses. The committee made the final word on the questions posed to the candidates and added additional information for context. Keep in mind, though, that I may jump in with a follow-up to seek clarifications if it so needs. I want to thank all the respondents who submitted the questions from the neighborhoods. It was clear there are items that they wanted to bring forward. Their passion for Portland and your concerns were heard loud and clear. The first question, we're going to really start, and the next two will be based on unsheltered homelessness. In organizing this forum, the predominance of questions we've received from the community deal with unsheltered homelessness and the resulting tent encampments and non-permanent structures that are an ever-increasing presence in our city. In 2016, the City of Portland and Multnomah County joined forces and budgets to address homelessness by creating the Joint Office of Homeless Services. The ambitious vision of the Joint Office was to provide, quote, a home for everyone. In 2017, the Joint Office of Homeless Services had a budget of $45 million, and there were 1,887 unsheltered souls sleeping in places not meant for human habitation. This year, in 2022, the budget for the Joint Office of Homeless Services had grown to $161 million, 3.5 times its initial budget. And the unsheltered homelessness has grown to 3,611 souls, twice as many as when the program began. The question: why, despite the investment, have we not made an impact and the crisis continues to swell? What will you do differently to ensure that we can bring about an end to unsheltered homelessness? I'm going to begin, and we're going to go stage right to left. So Renee, Joanne, Sharon, and then Jessica. Please, Mr. Gonzalez.
First and foremost, I think we've made some mistakes in how we allocate resources. I'm a shelter first guy. I think that's where we need to prioritize our dollars going forward. We can't ask Portlanders to wait a decade for enough affordable housing before we address the challenges of the unsheltered. So put at the top of the list, we need to prioritize shelter. That needs to be on a continuum from safe sleeping spaces to high barrier shelter, the full continuum. You look at West Coast cities versus East Coast cities, and how they've confronted the complexity of homelessness in general. In general, the East Coast has done a better job of addressing the unsheltered because they focus on providing shelter. Second, we have a crisis in addiction in the state, the city, and county, made worse by Measure 110, made worse by the pandemic. And if we need to do everything in our power to make sure the promised $110 get fully distributed effectively in Multnomah County and in the city. Whether the joint office is going to take a lead role on that is a little bit TBD, in my opinion. I'm curious to hear from others on that point. But at the end of the day, we collectively have to be very loud advocates that those dollars are effectively distributed in our region. I think for the city, I think part of the discussion in the coming years is the dollars going to the joint office the best way to use those dollars? Should the city be taking the lead on some parts of the shelter component and doing that more directly? Open to a dialogue on that discussion. But in order to assure adequate shelter, we've got to look at the 40 to 50 million that comes from the city to the joint office, and really take a step back and determine whether we're getting the best ROI on those dollars. So I'd leave it there.
Very good. Thank you so much. Commissioner Steve, Joanne?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. So the question as it stands: why, despite the investment, the $45 million in 2016 to 161 million today, with double the unsheltered on the street in those few years. Despite the investment, have we not made an impact and the crisis continues to swell? What will you do differently to ensure that we bring about an end to unsheltered homelessness?
Thank you for repeating the question. Let me just say, when I arrived at City Hall January of 2019, I asked those same questions. What are we getting for the $40 million that we have given to the city every year to create the Joint Office? I would ask Mark Jolin. How are we increasing the wages of the most vulnerable workers that are working with our most vulnerable community members? And his response would be, that's not a city issue. The county has to decide that. So then I started digging and going through the paperwork and looked at the intergovernmental agreement that Commissioner Dan Salzman signed to create the Joint Office. You will be shocked to know that there's absolutely no detail in that intergovernmental agreement. Basically, it says we'll give you $40 million a year and we'll create a Joint Office. The best I can tell, what we get for that is 200 shelter beds and 100 in bad weather. Now, Oregonians have experienced traumatic crises back to back to back in the last 3 years. Our houseless population has exploded. We abandoned houseless people on the street when COVID started. And with my leadership, we created 4 outdoor shelter spaces, the very first new beds for people during COVID. What's going to get us out of this crisis is actually understanding that workers are being priced out. The city should be buying up properties downtown and all over the city and actually land banking it and limiting development to 60% of area median income. When renters like myself are facing a 14% rent increase in January, we will have more houseless people. And that is the problem. The problem is it costs too darn much to live in the city of Portland, and workers' salaries have not caught up with the rising price in food and gas and transportation. And as the transportation commissioner, I still believe public transit should be free if we're trying to build a climate-friendly future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Commissioner Myron.
Why, thank you.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Teamwork makes the dream work. There's so much here, it's hard to address in this brief time we have together, but I would concur in terms of the intergovernmental agreement between the county and the city of Portland. The county has exclusive authority over the Joint Office of Homeless Services. It is a county department. The chair has exclusive authority over the director of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and the chair has exclusive authority under the agreement that was negotiated whenever that was over the joint office. And so it's not really a joint office, frankly. That agreement allows the city to contribute hundreds of millions of dollars to homelessness, but it doesn't allow for equal partnership in determining how those dollars are spent. I spent the past years engaging with my fellow commissioners at the city around what we can do better to be better partners to collaborate toward creating an ecosystem of shelters and solutions to meet the needs of our entire community. And I would point out that having done this work, over the next year, we are due to renegotiate that contract. I have the collaboration, I have the relationships already, I have the understanding of the deep issues facing those who are houseless in our community to be able to advance those immediately upon starting as county chair. And that is huge. I don't need to have meetings. I don't need to have, do the next steps, etc., and take months. I can hit the ground running. We can negotiate a contract to have a true joint office of homeless services, collaborative, meeting the needs of our population.
Commissioner Myron, thank you so much. And Commissioner Vega-Peterson.
Thank you. So for whomever is going to be serving on Portland City Council, whoever is going to be the county chair, Addressing our houselessness crisis is going to be the number one priority that we have to work on. And it has to be something that we have to work on together. We know that the fundamental issues of why we are seeing people living unsheltered on our street, housing affordability, and lack of access to behavioral health care are things that haven't changed. In fact, they've only gotten worse. I think it was Commissioner Hardesty who talked about the increase. Since COVID, rents have gone up 30% in terms of what's affordable for people. We have not just people who are living outside, who continue to live outside, but we have more and more people at risk of having to live outside. So it is incumbent upon both of the governments to work together well in order to address these issues. People shouldn't have to worry about what is the county's lane, what is the city's lane. They just need to know that government is working and working together well in order to address these issues. And this is something that I am deeply committed to. I've had conversations with city commissioners, I've had conversations with the mayor that when I'm elected chair, the first priority will be to sit down with the city and talk about all of the different areas where the city and the county work together to make sure that we are addressing the biggest crises in front of us and removing the obstacles that prevent us from working together well. This is something that I have a track record of doing and we need to continue doing. I think what is going to be different under my leadership than what we've been seeing currently is that in addition to a real dedication to true partnership and working together, recognizing that a government entity that is putting $40 to $50 million a year into a budget to address homelessness does need to have a say in what's happening, but also making sure that we are working and advocating with Metro and working together to ensure that our system and the investments that are being made through the Supportive Housing Services measure are being fit to work in a way that truly addresses the issue. There's a lot more on my website if you look under my homelessness area about that as well.
All right. I want to thank each of you for a substantive response. You brought up the IGA. It's the first debater forum. I've heard that collaborative approach, and it sounds like you're all open-minded, which is really what is going to be needed to move our region together, which is together. With that said, you both alluded, or at least Jessica and Renee, about data or numbers and about management, which really gets to key performance indicators. In other words, it's $161 million in a private enterprise. You talked about ROI, Renee. There would be a accountability on what sort of operational excellence is being moved forward. But in this case, it's saving lives. It's so much more grander than what we ever could have talked about as far as a business. This is lives. These next two questions are similar, and we're going to stay in the unsheltered area. I am going to ask Joanne for you to move the mic over to Sharon. And Sharon, let's talk about specifics now. Mm-hmm. What strategies and alternatives would you use for reducing unsheltered homelessness during your term in office? And what are your specific numerical targets for reducing during your term in office? So we're looking at specifics instead of grand numbers, IGAs. What in your 4 years, knowing that the millions are there, are your targets to specifically gauge your team on as CEO?
I love this question so much. Thank you. This is something that I've been pushing for, and as an emergency physician, as someone who looks at data all the time, I've been shocked at the lack of data at the Joint Office of Homeless Services and in the county as a whole. We need to be understanding who the people are who are living outside in our communities so that we can actually get them the services that they need to move beyond that. We have done nothing of the sort. We put out information. I mean, really, it's the rhetoric we use. It's not data. It is, we are saying, oh, this, our point in time count, not an actual count, by the way. Our point in time count says, oh, this number of people is living outside. Here's what we might need to do. We're going to put a bunch of money into doing some vague things. I have been calling all along for data, understanding who people are, how many people are, where they are living, what they need, so we can invest our resources in an accountable way to account for what services we are getting people and how we are getting them out of homelessness. I was responsible collaborating with Commissioner Dan Ryan at the city for getting Built for Zero implemented, which is an opportunity for the first actual data-driven system to address how many people are living outside, and Built for Zero so we can get to 0 people living unsheltered. That is the work I do, and it's because of my deep relationships. I work as a volunteer with Portland Street Medicine. I've spoken with hundreds of people living outside. What they are telling me jives with what I see. We don't have great accountability right now. We have no accountability, and we need that to make a difference.
And thank you, Sharon. I appreciate it. I want to go back to, and with all due respect, to the commissioners and Mr. Gonzalez. Do you have any? It was focused on strategies, and I appreciate that. But notwithstanding, let's focus on targets. In your 4 years, taking office as CEO in January, with the 6 years prior, do you have any specific targets that you've looked at, you've determined, or something that is far-reaching yet achievable that we can leave our audience today?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I do. Built for Zero is a strategy, and the goal is 0 people living unsheltered outside. And I have worked with Dan Ryan to implement Built for Zero in our community. If we apply this in the right way, we can get to 0 people living unsheltered in our community within less than 4 years. I would say within the next year to 2 years. Yes.
And thank you for letting me do that ad hoc. I will be as respectful to all of you, and no impartiality will be given. But thank you for that. I was really looking at that. That was the tone and the tenor that we really want, is moving from rhetoric to action, but also holding ourselves accountable to that as well. I'm going to move on to Jessica, and then we're going to move on to Renee and finish with Joanne. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So whether I'm talking to business owners in the J District along 82nd Avenue, or people who are trying to start their small business in downtown or Old Town, or parents that are living in East Portland, everybody recognizes the impact that homelessness is having on the neighborhoods they're living on their ability to, feel like they can be part of the solution. I think there is a huge frustration right now with people not seeing what's happening. So I think a couple of the concrete goals that I have as county chair in addressing our homelessness crisis is to first make sure that the data that we are gathering is accurate and it is clearly communicated to the public in a way that is transparent. I also think that we have to be looking at outcomes and metrics that people are going to be judges us on our ability to reach that. So I think one of the measures is we're never going to prevent everyone from experiencing homelessness. So my focus is going to be on limiting the time that people are experiencing homelessness. Chronic homelessness is somebody who is at risk or living homeless for like a long length of time. And we need to shorten that number. So as county chair, in working with the city, working with our partners, really trying to get to a goal where people will not, who enter homelessness will not be staying homelessness for more than 45 days, right? We will be getting them into the system. We also need to have a system that is making sure that we are, one of the goals that I have is making sure that all of our providers that are doing outreach and navigation and providing services are going to be accountable for tracking that data. That's 100% rate that we are going to have people that are going to be doing that work. That is something that we don't right now have. We don't have a consistent way that people are getting data, and that data is not then being shared transparently. And I think ultimately we also have to make sure that we are having numbers to prevent people from becoming homelessness in the first place. And so I want to increase by 50% of the households that we're working with to help them prevent from entering homelessness in the first place.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that. Renee?
Yeah, so let's take a baseline, 2022 point in time, and I just Googled it to make sure I had the right numbers. So it's we're talking 5,000 homeless in Multnomah County and 3,000 unsheltered, roughly speaking. The unsheltered number is particularly damning. That's a 50% increase over the 2019 number. So our first baseline goal has to be that number is no longer increasing, right? So we have to stabilize and that it's not exploding at the way it is. I'd say at minimum, over a 4-year cycle, we've got to get back to the 2019 number for unsheltered. That's so first goal, don't make it get larger. Second goal is to try and get back to 2019. More of a stretch goal is at least 20 to 25% reduction, over a 4 to 10 year period. That's where I'd start. We hope to exceed that big time, but at least to try and return to 2019 level. But finally, I don't want to overemphasize it too much. Don't make the problem worse. Sometimes the things there are unintended consequences. Sometimes when we try to swing for the fences, let's not keep digging a ditch. Let's stabilize and then try and get back to 2019 at minimum.
Thank you, Renee. Joanne?
Old Town was safest when Right to Dream 2 was in Old Town. Why don't we have 40 to 50 self-managed villages where the people who live there have the opportunity to safely rest, not be harassed by neighbors or police? We should have more of those. I'm still trying to understand why the city of Portland owns 5 golf courses. If we are in a housing crisis and we are under the third mayor who's declared that is so, you would think we would use land that we already have, we'd put it in a public land trust, and we would start building for 60% of area median income. Today, for a family of 4, that is $97,500. I don't know too many people who are waitress, musicians, creative class, teachers who make $100,000 a year in order to be able to live comfortably in the city of Portland. Until we address the fact that the city of Portland has become unaffordable for working people, this houseless problem is only going to get worse. And let me also say that the point and count, it has never been an accurate count of the people who are experiencing houselessness. It doesn't address the people who are doubled and tripled up. It doesn't address the people who are sleeping in their automobiles. There's a whole host of things that those numbers don't address. I am saddened that after 3 mayors have declared a housing emergency, we are worse off today than we were when the first mayor declared it to be so. And so what it will take will be not actually appeasing the privileged class of developers who think they run the city of Portland. What it will take is for Portlanders to say, wait a minute, we have a limited amount of land and we want this city to always be affordable and accessible for all people at all income levels. That's what a thriving city is. It's not a city for the wealthy where you bus in poor people to service them.
Joanne, thank you. Do you have specific targets that you would look at in that 4-year span of your term?
Yes, I would immediately, not being the housing commissioner, I would immediately actually advocate that the mayor redirect his efforts from actually just sweeping people out of view to actually making sure we're moving people into safe, secure places where people's dignity can stay intact. When we actually sweep people, we've done nothing to address the issue of the fact that they are houseless. All we've done is push it into another neighborhood. So for me, again, the 40 villages, what I know is that if we actually gave people safe, clean places to stay today, it would separate them from the people who are committing crimes and that are actually preying on our houseless community members, right? Okay. But every time we move somebody, it's like, where do you want me to move? Okay. And the city has been ineffective in the county at actually giving people an answer to that.
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate that. We're going to stay with you, Joanne, and then we're going to move to Renee. We'll go to Jessica and then Sharon for this next question. We're really going to focus on the collaboration between city and county, and we're really hitting on something right there just to try and create that dialogue. The combination of COVID-19 pandemic, a string of violent protests, an increase in drug use and unsheltered homelessness, and an increase in both violent and property crime is leading to the flight of businesses and residents to the suburbs. Long-time established businesses are closing. Office workers are working from home. The downtown is entering into a commercial real estate recession as occupancy decline, foreclosures mount, and property values in the city revenues decline. That's appropriate and associated with that. The infrastructure that prior city, county, state, and philanthropic investment has created needs considerable attention right now. Downtown will not be the same coming out of this. but we can also make it better if we have a well thought out plan, apply the right strategies, and work together. What are the two most significant things the city and county can do together to help shape a new center of Oregon's largest city and make it safe and vibrant? John.
So let me say that I have a great relationship with all the county commissioners, with Tina Kotek, who I hope will be our next governor. And it will take all three of these governments working together to fix this problem. This problem is too big for Portland by itself. It's too big for Multnomah County by itself. And so right now I'm talking with our legislative delegation who, as you may know, the kicker is about to kick and we're about to send $5 billion out the door, which is the most ludicrous thing on the planet at this time. And so I'm working with our legislative body to say, I believe that voters will support the legislature holding back $1 billion for housing and $1 billion for mental health services. We are still at the bottom in the United States for providing mental health services. So the people who are suffering on our street, we have nowhere to take them. And so for me, I think it's about knowing how all the pieces of our government fit together. Because of my relationships with our federal delegation, you may notice I've been bringing in millions of dollars in federal funds to support transportation infrastructure improvements, to address climate mitigation, and working with them to figure out how, as we do these big transportation projects, that we don't miss the opportunity to build housing people can afford to live in.
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate that. Renee?
So let's look at two existing structures in terms of how the city and county work together. One, a joint office on homelessness, is one that gets a lot of attention. And certainly when you look at the degradation of downtown, the externalities created by unsanctioned camping is a major contribution to that. It is unwelcoming to many visitors precisely because we have so much unsheltered camping downtown. So part of it is we've got to get that that office working more effectively than it is, directly targeted at the unsheltered. Second, the LPSCC. This is not a committee that many people know much about, but it's the city and county's joint effort to address criminal justice in the region. And downtown is overwhelmed by vandalism, by car thefts, by petty thefts, much less assaults and some very serious homicides throughout the region. There has to be a criminal justice response to some of those challenges. And we have an existing framework under which the city and county work together on addressing those issues. We need to center victims in the discussions for that committee. They often seem to be an afterthought in a lot of our discussions about criminal justice. We also have to center justice itself, that if someone is wronged downtown, wronged throughout the city, that they're going to have recourse in the court system. So again, for the audience, two groups that for you to think about is called the LPSCC. It's an existing framework. We need to center it more effectively on victims and the concept of justice. And the joint office, for homelessness, we've got to getting the unsheltered numbers down. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Renee.
I think people may want to know what LPSC stands for. He is referring to the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council that I co-chair with Chair Deborah Kafory. And it is a legislative created committee. All 36 counties have them. So I don't think that Mr. Gonzalez actually knows what we do, but I'm happy to educate him later, maybe.
Well, Joanne, I can certainly see the outcomes, and they ain't good.
Thank you too very much. Jessica?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. Shall I just repeat the question?
Yeah.
Okay, you got it. What are the two most significant things the city and county could do together to help shape a new center of Oregon's largest city and make it safe and vibrant city?
Yeah. So this is the $1 million question. It's probably like the $1 billion question, honestly, when we talk about the future of Portland and its role in Multnomah County as well. When I talk with downtown business owners, they talk about really two things. And what comes through loud and clear is the frustration that they've had about the lack of response from police if there's an issue where they call police, the lack of alternatives to the police in terms of helping somebody who is having a behavioral health crisis downtown, and what they see is the lack of cooperation between the city and the county to actually work together and be responsive. So all of these things are what we hear, and it's what we see. As county chair, it's going to be imperative that we sit down as the county with the city to talk about the reality of what downtown looks like. We have huge downtown employers like the Standard saying we are not going to require our employees to come back down to work. We, as chair, I will work with the mayor to convene downtown business leaders to talk about what is the reality of, look, what are you actually anticipating in terms of the number of employees that you're going to have coming downtown, and knowing that we may not have large, numbers of employees downtown, how are we going to attract smaller businesses? How are we going to increase the entrepreneur opportunities for people who are living in Portland and Multnomah County to actually come and be downtown, start their businesses, and have a different kind of center for our city? This is something that is a crisis right now, but it is also an opportunity. One of the things that I have been doing is talking with downtown building owners who are really interested in seeing how these commercial properties can actually be turned into residential. Not every downtown building, commercial building, is going to be appropriate to be turned into housing or affordable housing. But we have developers, we have business leaders, building owners who are really committed to this. And as chair, I will be working with them. And this is something that we can be and should be doing with the city, with the role that they have in running PHP, our Portland Housing Bureau.
I want to thank each of you for very specific answers. I appreciate you getting right to that question. We're going to move on to behavioral health. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sharon. Please forgive me. I told you I would stay in complete control.
But it was a good answer, I promise.
I ran off the rail. Thank you. Forgive me.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate your repeating that question. And the two most significant things are, I think, along the lines of what Renee mentioned with the Joint Office of Homeless Services, where we should be having a very formal relationship, and we need to renegotiate that. And LIPSIC, the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, where Commissioner Hardesty is currently co-chair, and our current county chair is chair. So many chairs. But we have not, what we do at all of the meetings, the infinite meetings for all of these agencies, is just get fed information. I go to all of them. I attend all of them. And I have found that all of these, they're meetings about meetings. We don't get anything done. We don't have action items. We don't address the issues that are brought up with local public safety, with our joint, supposedly, Office of Homeless Services. And we need to get to the bottom of that. We need functional organizations and groups that come together to collaborate and have public dialogue, even when we disagree about these big issues facing our county. So those meetings, which the chair currently is in charge of, I would take control. I would work with my co-chairs, whoever those may be, and work to have conversation and dialogue, because that's what we need. That's what we're not having around these huge issues facing our county. And so I just would add to that we, there's such opportunity in both of those areas. There's so many issues we can talk about and should talk about, and solutions we can come to together. But we just talk and talk and talk and have more meetings, and we need to stop. We need to come together, talk, have dialogue, and figure out solutions.
Well, again, thank you for the being specific, all four of you. I'll repeat that again. We're going to move on to behavioral health questions now. Jessica, we'll stay with you. Sharon, move to you. Joanne, and then Renee. And I'll keep order, I promise. In 2020, Measure 110 was passed by voters to decriminalize the possession of small amounts of illicit drugs like meth, heroin, and fentanyl. The new approach represented a pivot from police, jail, and courts towards treatment and recovery, making a quantum leap in treating addiction as a behavioral health issue rather than a crime. In Multnomah County and Portland, the implementation is not going as planned. 2 years after passage, Oregon is ranked second worst in the nation in terms of drug addiction and last in terms of treatment options. OPB just announced $58 million in Measure 110 funds are being dispersed to Multnomah County, but stated that none of this is for drug treatment directly. It is mostly for harm reduction and peer counseling. The law implementing Measure 110 envisioned that local law enforcement, in place of arresting drug users, would write violations for drug use. The fine for the violation would be waived if the recipient appeared and agreed to drug treatment assessment. And then outreach workers would help get people with addiction into treatment. Citations were meant as a way of getting people help. On average, the 4 law enforcement agencies in Multnomah County write only 7 citations per month. Of the ones that are written, 60% of defendants do not show up for their court dates. Most people in downtown community believe that open drug use and dealing have increased significantly, although good data is scarce. Our question: what changes, if any, would you advocate for Measure 110? What methods should we be using in getting people into treatment and recovery? As our community leader, tell us what we should expect for the time being. Is open drug use our new normal in terms of public health, crime, and livability? And I realize there's a lot packed in there, but the questions we're trying to get synthesized. But I'm sure you can understand the tone and the tenor of that question. So we're going to begin with Jessica, please.
Yes. So there's been so much conversation about Measure 110. This actually has come up, I think, in every single interview and forum that we've had so far in this race. So I will say that I believe that the goal of Measure 110 to address the racial disparities in who was being arrested for drug treatment or for drug possession, and the fact that we had great racial disparities, and that the goal is to decriminalize, to address those, is a very lofty goal, and it is a very good goal, and that is a goal that still needs to be supported. The plan of decriminalizing and then not having the grant money go out the door until months and months and months later was a horrible plan. That is something, and I will say, in Preschool for All, the measure that I championed, we actually made sure that we were going to have an 18-month ramp up before we opened the doors to students, so that we could have the plan, we could have the programs in place, we could have the partnerships and the money allocated to start strong. And that is what was missing with Measure 110. But we are where we are right now, and that's where we have to go from. So the fact is, Measure 110 dollars should be used for treatment for those people who are uninsured or underinsured. We do have, for those people who have Medicaid insurance, for those people who have their own private insurance, there are dollars that should go through the CCOs and through their insurance for recovery and addiction treatment. But we absolutely should be putting some of the Measure 110 dollars, not just for harm reduction, but for addiction treatment for the uninsured population. Another thing that I would change with Measure 110 is that right now, OHA does not have a requirement that the behavioral health resource networks that Measure 110 set up have to do coordination with the local mental health authority, which is Multnomah County for this area. Also, they don't have to coordinate with the CCOs, and that is something, as the chair, I will strongly advocate for that change. We need to have the coordination to make sure that investment is working.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Sharon?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is one of the reasons I ran to be at the county in the first place. I am an ER doctor. I actually take care of people who are in mental health crisis, who are in a crisis from drug addiction. And this is a perspective working on that front line that no one else brings to the county. And I have to say, it has been frustrating also at the state level that what we are seeing are such ineffective policies. We have the idea we should decriminalize the drug use. The criminal behaviors related to drug use, and we should address those. We do not have any consequences. The Oregon Health Authority has failed to take on its responsibility to do something about this, and as a result, the counties are just absorbing all of this mess. And it's not a mess in the sense only of the millions of dollars it's costing taxpayers. It's lives. People are suffering on our streets. I see it in the ER. I see it working as a volunteer with Portland Street Medicine. And we do not have consequences. We do not have anything to get people on a better path. And this is so upsetting to me. I see how we can connect the dots. I see how we can make networks where people are treated, receive the supports that they need to advance, to get housing and other services in our communities. And as chair, I will be an advocate, not just as the local mental health authority, which is our role as the county, but also as just the advocate to the legislature to have oversight of the Oregon Health Authority. I know these situations firsthand. I know the people. I have the relationships with the health systems, the CCOs, all of the people doing that frontline work. That's where we need to go and connect and support people with alternatives.
Thank you, Sharon. Joanne?
Oh, let's see. I forgot what the question
No
was.
problem. Absolutely. Midway through, I completely understand. What changes, if any, would you advocate for Measure 110? What
Okay,
methods?
I got it now.
Okay, I got it.
Thank you. Sorry. I just couldn't remember
You bet.
what the question was. Let me just say that Measure 110 had the right spirit. What we know is people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol should not be criminally prosecuted, but should have access to the care they need to address their addiction. And voters are very wise individuals in Portland. And so in Oregon, and they understood that that was what the vision was. But unfortunately, the rollout at the state has been horrifically bad. And honestly, I can't think of one thing since COVID that rolled out at the state level that worked as intended. But that's another conversation. Let me just say that the reality is that when we have open air drug deals taking place in Portland, that is still illegal. And we have public safety officers who are supposed to arrest people who are involved in criminal behavior. It is not appropriate for the police to tell the public what the DA will or won't do, right? The DA gets to tell the public what the DA will and won't do. And I will tell you that the calls I get from the public that says, the police say there's nothing they can do. Well, there are over 740 sworn officers today. There are 100 vacant positions that they are advertising for. And let me tell you, with maintenance, I got 500 workers that never had a day off, but they don't go to the public and whine that they don't have enough maintenance workers so they can't do their job, or that the boss won't support this, so I won't do it. So let me just say that as the public, we have to actually push back. When you get a call, there's nothing I can do, really. I ask Chief Lavelle, I ask Deputy Chief Foreman this almost every week. What are you doing if you can't? How can 700 and some officers not be able to do anything because you're down 100 officers, right? We need our police to actually show up and provide public safety, because open air drug dealing is illegal. It was never decriminalized, and the police should do their job and arrest people who are doing that.
Thank you, Joanne. Renee?
Just a little bit saddened. The question was what we should change about Measure 110. And Joanne blames the police, but
I did not blame the police for Measure 110.
Let me finish my
Don't
point.
mischaracterize me.
Well, we just heard 30 seconds of all the things police didn't do right. And the
Well, that
question
they
was
are
Measure
not
110.
prosecuting people for open air drug dealing. Am I
think it-
wrong about that?
Joanne, let's move on to.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Don't misrepresent me.
I'm not misrepresenting. We heard about
You
the
just
police
did
on a
it.
question
You
about
just did
Measure
it.
110.
We're going to be respectful, but don't misrepresent me.
We'll go back and watch the video and replay what you said there. So in terms of Measure 110, we were supposed to be following the Portuguese model. We didn't. Fundamentally, the Portuguese model can compel treatment. We, for a variety of reasons in Oregon, decided that was not the path we would go. We need to take a hard reset. When someone is a prisoner to chemicals, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about substance use disorder or addiction, it's not like they have complete free will. And so there has to be points where a state intercedes in a folks' cycle of self-destructive behavior. And so most fundamentally with Measure 110, that was a structural mistake, that we did not include provisions that could compel treatment. We were following what was supposed to be done in Europe. We didn't do it whole hog. That was a fundamental mistake. Going down a level, what can the city do in response to Measure 110 to lessen its more negative effects? I do think we need to be crystal clear about the behaviors that result from hard drug use. If those are crimes, we still need to prosecute them. Your addiction does not excuse those behaviors. Secondly, I do believe we need to work with the state and federal authorities to look at some of the real hard drug pushers throughout our region for both fentanyl and meth. These are brutal chemicals that folks are ingesting into their bodies. And once they're addicted, it's a really brutal path. But most fundamentally, if I were tomorrow to change Measure 110, I put at the top of the list a structure that can compel treatment. It was a big omission.
Okay. Thank you, Renee. I appreciate that. Renee, on this next question, we're going to begin with you, Joanne, Sharon, and then Jessica. We're going to stay on drugs related, and the behavioral consequences that come, and then the downstream effect in communities and neighbors. Our next behavioral health question relates to treatment or hold against one's will. Oregon has some of the most protective civil commitment laws and related case law in the nation, and in many ways, this affects the ability to address behavioral health issues, both drug-induced and mental illness during times of crisis. What's more, the crisis has been supercharged this year with many illegal drugs now mixed with fentanyl and new, even stronger P2P meth that has hit our streets in this past year, which can lead to severe mental illness and psychosis, which is only compounding an already extraordinary behavioral health crisis on our street. Many of us living downtown have called 911 related to people on the streets passed out, actively in crisis, or threatening others. Irrespective of which first responder arrives, if the person declines treatment and is not violent at that moment, the first responder must leave, even when the responder knows the person needs attention, detox, or stabilization. Often the behavior begins again once they have left, creating a cycle that plays out over and over. This can be quite frustrating to both the public as well as the first responders, and inhumane to the person experiencing the psychotic episode. The question from that: what resources are coming online in the near term, and are these new resources enough? What changes and additional services and plans are you going to advocate and champion in order to meet the level of need and suffering on our streets and in our community? We're going to begin with you, Renee.
Yeah, so city and county are, as I understand, are working on a project called the Beacon Project that fills an important gap in the service model, and I look forward to hearing the full details of how that's rolling out. But one of the gaps identified in our current service model is the events where you have high toxicity, either of meth or fentanyl in someone's body. Right now, the first responders are left with really bad choices in terms of how to intercede in that situation. If someone's engaging in low-level criminal activity, then there's the potential for arrest and going to county jail, but it's really not an effective way to intercede with someone whose primary problem is just high toxicity. The alternative is they often end up in the emergency room, which has its own really devastating effects on our health system. It's an incredibly inefficient way to deal with it. We're left to emergency room nurses and doctors to deal at times with a violent person because of the level of meth in their body. And so this is a gap. First responders, whether you're talking about police or fire, they don't have a good place to take that person right now. That often leads to not interceding until things get really, really bad. That's not effective for that individual. It's not effective for society. I would say more holistically, one of our biggest challenges in Oregon on this very difficult topic is that we've done so well in leading with compassion. That is the Portland way. That is the Oregon way. We all are also deeply respectful of individual rights. This is a beautiful part of our legacy. but we haven't balanced it with demands for personal responsibility. And that has led to enablement, which to me is the cruelest form of slow death. And that's what we see in the streets of Portland today. Thank
you. Anything that you would champion specifically, Renee, on that?
Well, we've got to get the Beacon Project in an effective way for acute detox to get online.
Okay, thank you so much. Joanne.
We have to make sure that the legislature fully funds these behavioral health programs. Today, regardless of who the first responder is, there's no place to take most people. As someone who rides public transit and walks all over downtown and East Portland and North Portland, I can tell you I have been terrified at times and scared at times, not for myself, but for the person who was in that crisis at that moment. Because your first thought is, who do you call? And as the person who created Portland Street Response, I know it's not available yet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for all the people who could utilize it, right? Do you call the police? I had a naked woman in my apartment complex that was talking to herself just this past week. We called 911. And when they said they were going to send the police, me and my neighbors were, oh, is Portland Street Response available? And then they said, no. I said, well, we need a behavioral health response. Because can you imagine someone who is already in crisis for people yelling orders at them? So what we need is actually to acknowledge the lack of mental health and behavioral health services and get that training on steroids. I know that Tina Kotek actually funded in the last legislative session a program to expedite ensuring we have culturally competent mental health and behavioral health professionals. You know, I did a deal with Care Oregon that most people in government would have never considered. Care Oregon is paying me to hire healthcare professionals to go into the homes of low-income people through Portland Fire and Rescue. Under my leadership, we now have a health component because guess what? 80% of Portland Fire and Rescue calls are health-related calls. We are one of the biggest unrecognized healthcare agencies in the city of Portland. Sorry.
Thank you, Joanne. Sharon?
This is, can you restate?
You bet. And in fact, I kind of expected from a county side to really hear the specifics because I know you've got a lot working on. What resources are coming online in the near term? And are these resources enough? And we really want to punctuate that. What changes and additional services and plans are you going to advocate and champion in order to meet the level of need and suffering on our streets and in our community?
So this speaks to me directly as an ER doctor who sees people coming in crisis, one of those who receives the people from first responders because there's nowhere for them to go other than the ER or jail, and says, okay, they're not an imminent risk to themselves or others, so we have to let them go, and there's nowhere for them to go. I am that person who sees, I've seen hundreds, thousands of people in that situation. I've also seen this as Portland street medicine, as a doctor going out to encampments, seeing people in crisis and knowing there's nowhere for them to go. And I have seen our failure as a county, the local mental health authority, who is supposed to have the oversight over this system, to have a handle on it. I came in thinking I could tweak a system, whatever. And then I got a peek behind the curtain. There is no system to tweak. And so I started from the beginning saying, what can we do to help people to create systems where they can be served and treated in the way that's appropriate for their illness? And it has been extremely challenging, frustrating, devastating to see what we have been doing as local government. The city has taken on some of our responsibility because we have not taken it on ourselves with Portland Street Response, thank you, and with Portland with medicine for public health. This is our responsibility as the county, and no one understands it better than I do. I have been on the inception board for the Behavioral Health Emergency Coordination for Meth Stabilization, a resource center to triage, get people where they need to go. My opponent will say, oh, Sharon Myron failed at getting that passed. The only failure was the fact that the chair did not want to support it and came in and then suddenly took over. Everything went behind closed doors, and then we don't know what's happening now.
Thank you, Sharon. Jessica.
Yeah, so there are resources that are currently, imminently coming online. The first one is the Downtown Behavioral Health Resource Center that is going to be opening downtown. This is going to do 3 different things. The first and second floors are going to be a day shelter. People have been advocating and hoping for 20 years to have a place where people who are living outside can go downtown, be safe. There is an indoor space as well as an outdoor space. That's going to be opening up in November of 2023, so just in a couple of months. This is a huge difference, and it will make a huge difference in downtown. I know that there are already conversations happening of how the people who are living outside can know about this resource, connecting with businesses, connecting with our central library to have people go there. It will also have a floor for people who have such high levels of acuity with behavioral health issues that they're not able to be successful in other shelters. This will be a site where they're going to be able to go and get the additional help and support through peer support services that they need to be more successful. And then finally, it will have transitional housing for people who are coming out of addiction treatment, to actually have a place where they can stay. So we're not releasing people who have just gone through treatment that we've invested in and releasing them to the street. So all those things are going to be opening up in subsequent months, but this will be a game changer. And as county chair, I will be making the investments to make sure that this is successful, and hopefully we can be modeling this in other places further east in the county. I think the other thing that's I would do as chair is really advocate at the state for changes in how we are managing both civil commitments. I have my cousin is a social worker in California, and we were downtown, saw somebody experiencing a crisis, and she's like, why aren't they getting help? And it was like, we don't have the right laws to do so. So civil commitments, increasing the time that people are be able to help or detoxing from meth, and also making more investments in the Oregon hospitals. Right now, we only have 15 beds in the Oregon State Hospital for people who are civil commitments. That is not enough, and that's why they're being sued. So those are some of the things I would do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. We're going to move on to 2 final crime questions before our closing statement. Sharon, we're going to start with you on this one. Jessica, will move to you, Renee, and then Joanne. Property crime is skyrocketing. 10 years ago, Portland property crime ranking was 31st highest among the 100 largest U.S. cities. Today, Portland has the 7th highest property crime in the nation. Portland manages the police and criminal investigations. The county manages the courts, the jail, the sheriff department. The county also sets policy for what prosecutions are pursued and the public defender's office. In a very real sense, the city and the county are codependent when it comes to crime. How can the city and county better communicate and coordinate to reduce crime now? And we are going to begin with Sharon.
Thank you for that question. There is so much that we can be doing and should be doing working together to address crime. It has to do with the local Public Safety Coordinating Council, which Renee alluded to earlier, where we should be coming together to have these open conversations about what's happening and come together to engage around solutions. We have not had that under current leadership by the chair of Multnomah County. I would institute an approach that is proactive, engaging, and talks about solutions so we can come to those together as a community. I believe that we need to have neighborhood DAs, which I advocated strongly for the county and was adopted despite some initial pushback, to have DAs in our neighborhoods, Old Town and East County, which is what I push for, so that we can have the prosecutors developing relationships in community to be able to identify people at risk of crime who are involved in multiple crimes cycling through our centers and get them the services they need if they need services or on a different path so that we can reduce the crime that's happening in our neighborhoods. It's about relationship. I got this passed in our recent county budget. We need more of that. We need those kinds of relationships and services for mental health, addictions, for people who have been facing challenges in their lives so that we can either have consequences for the crimes that are occurring and prevent future crimes from occurring. I have proposed also that we have a dedicated conversation with the facts and talk about this at Lipsick, I would say, about consolidating, merging the police into the county's system of the sheriff's office, some shared public safety system, because we do all of the prevention, we do all of those, the different systems you've talked about, and we are the ones, the only thing missing is law enforcement. We need to put it together holistically.
Thank you, Sharon. Jessica?
Thank you. So when we talk about how we can increase community safety, we have to look at two different things, right? We have to look at the root causes and the impacts that are causing criminal activity, and then we have to talk about what are the consequences of people who are engaging in criminal behavior, right? And these are both areas where the city and the county can be working more closely together. As county chair, I will make sure that Lipsick is a table that is supposed to be handling a lot of our public safety questions and conversations. It hasn't been as effective. And I really think the most effective thing we can do is get the leaders in the room to talk about how we are actually going to be addressing this through both our policies, our directions to our personnel, and on our budgeting decisions. So I think that it has the mayor, the county chair, the district attorney, the sheriff, the chief of police, as well as folks at our courts, to be talking about these things in a real meaningful way that really isn't happening right now, in terms of what are we budgeting for? How are we going to be making sure that dollars that the city is putting in and the dollars that the county are putting in are not being doubled up, where we're funding the same organizations, asking for the same outcomes, but we don't actually know what's being done, and we don't know that how that money is being used. So that is something where I think collaborative budgeting is going to be a really important thing. I also believe that we have to make sure that the investments that we're making upstream are also doing those same pieces, where we are making sure we're investing in organizations, but we're asking for outcomes of what's going to be happening. And I think that one of the things that the county has not been doing that will be a priority of mine as the county chair is making sure that we are giving people a path as they are transitioning out of jail or prison, as they are looking to have an alternative to a life that might be putting them at risk of engaging in activities. And that is having workforce connections, where we're going to need to have partnerships with businesses, with the city, to give people the opportunity, so that we're not just providing services and paying money, but we are actually giving them a path upward.
Thank you, Jessica. Renee?
Do you mind re-saying the question?
No trouble. How can the city and county better communicate and coordinate to reduce crime now?
Got it. So, obviously Lipsick is a huge piece, and I'm tickled that we're talking about it this much. I didn't think we'd get to do that here. Just a couple other dimensions that maybe aren't obvious, but Lipsick also interacts on things like how you implement sentencing guidelines in a county at the county level. They also influence bail policy. The courts are supposed to be a part of that dialogue as well. It's unfortunate it's not really functioning that way in Multnomah County in the city right now, but it really it's supposed to touch all parts of the criminal justice system in a county. So I'd say at a high level, we've got to center victims there again. We've got to be focused on justice. We have pursued some other venerable social justice initiatives at Lipsick, but it needs to be balanced against the needs of victims and, more broadly, justice. Additionally, we have approximately 240 jail space beds at Multnomah County right now. And at a time where we have out of control property crimes. And so we're evaluating right now a pilot to reestablish a municipal court for the city of Portland that would be focused on your catalytic converter thefts, your car thefts, your low-level property crimes. And really the goal there is to, one, disrupt the cycle of criminality going on. You often have repeat offenders that are doing multiple crimes in an annualized period. If you institute a municipal court, you can only prosecute them as misdemeanors, but you can at least disrupt that cycle. We also know a substantial number of those property crimes are driven by addiction, that there's some other underlying need. And so the hope is if we can start to interrupt those cycles, to intervene again, that we can drive more effectively diversion to addiction services. Literally, you face the ramifications of your behavior. You either go to jail or you enroll in addiction services. And that stick has been removed from Multnomah County and the city in recent years.
Renee, thank you very much. Joanne?
And so the question is how we work with the county to create community safety. Was that the gist of the question?
How can the county and the city better communicate and coordinate to reduce crime now?
There's some things that the county does exceptionally better than the city. And I will say coordinating around a police response to crime is one of them. What I know the county has done a very effective job of creating a coalition. Unfortunately, Portland Police doesn't like to work in coalition. But what I have seen is they have gotten significant numbers of weapons off the street because they're working with our federal law enforcement people. They're working with the alcohol, tobacco organizations, and they have been very effective. And, you know, I have my issues with the last Multnomah County Sheriff individually, but it's been very effective actually coordinating a public safety response to gun violence. I will say prior to COVID, when I came on city council, I invited Dr. John Jay from Boston University, who is an expert on how to reduce violence in communities across the country. He does a lot of research. I've had several meetings with both the city commission and the county commission, invited Lip Sync to have a presentation with him, because what we know is that violence, the root of violence is in unstable communities that have lacked investments, and that has been consistent forever. And what we know is that the way you reduce community violence is that you create a vibrant community where people walk around and they feel safe walking around. People know their neighbors. That's why I created outdoor spaces. That's why I created the Healthy Business Program with PBAT, so that small businesses could thrive during the pandemic, right? We have to think about community safety from the perspective of the community. What makes me feel safe in the community is knowing that I know my neighbors, knowing that I can walk around. And even in this heightened area of gun violence, I'm nervous, but guess what? I know the people in my neighborhood, and I know we work cooperatively to keep each other safe.
Thank you, Joanne. So we're really getting into the latter part of the forum now. We have one question left. But I really want to, but this one question stays on crime. And I'm going to give you some quotes from one of the respondents that we received this last couple weeks. Your answers were all very, very topical and very true and correct. This last question, Lipsig, those are the 30,000 foot level. It's going to take time. Municipal court. Those take time to implement to reap that reward or that transition we want. This one quote came into us and we wanted to just pass it on to you. And this is a community member who lives downtown. Homicides and assaults are now a part of our daily lives. A person was murdered in Old Town last night. Four people in the last week were brutally assaulted in the Pearl. 829 people were assaulted downtown last year. Women are scared to death to leave their homes at night. Neighborhoods are crying out to stop the violence. I wanted to kind of stop us and frame the last question with the immediacy of what these individuals are seeing and really ask this one question. What concrete steps would you take that would lead to a reduction in these assaults downtown and throughout the city and the county immediately, with the focus not on a long-lived bureaucratic or a jurisdictional or an agency change, but what could we expect from you on January 1st in your role as commissioner or county chair? On this last question, John, we're going to begin with you, okay? And we'll go to Renee, Jessica, and we'll finish with Sharon, all right?
You can expect me to continue to center the people of the city of Portland. And that's all the people of the city of Portland. As you know, I don't have the police in my portfolio. I don't have housing in my portfolio, but no one's done more to transform policing in 3.5 years than I have. In addition to that, we have to remember that we need to keep each other safe. One of the biggest challenges that we're dealing with right now is the overwhelming number of calls that come in to 911. As we've looked at those calls that come in, a good majority of them have been for unwanted people, right? And so how the city has addressed that by investing more money into the 311 call system, hoping that we could actually remove about 300,000 calls per year and move them to a place that's more appropriate than 911. We also have to re-educate the public about the 988 mental health number, the 311 information number, and make sure people understand that 911 is an emergency response. It is not for someone sleeping in a doorway or someone that you're uncomfortable looking at. We are all safer when we all have our eyes on the street, when we're out smiling and connecting with our neighbors. I can't tell you what a difference it makes to people who feel hopeless to have someone look at them and give them a smile. I have seen the best of Portlanders over what has been the hardest time in recent memories. And I've seen the best because Portlanders have looked out for our most vulnerable people. Even when government couldn't get there, it was community that was taking care of community. And that's what's going to bring us back more vibrant and more resilient than ever.
Thank you, Joanne. Renee?
So the question is, what immediate step would you take to address gun violence or homicides and assaults?
What concrete step? Understanding the acuity of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, we need more gang violence specialists, and they're expert at escalating conflicts. They are excellent at preventing the second homicide, even if they can't prevent the first one, by intervening in gang conflicts. And so we know from the data right now that our homicides in the city of Portland are clustered in two primary populations. One is gang violence, and two is our unsanctioned camps. It just tends to be where the homicides are clustering right now. So gang violence teams can't necessarily address what's going on in unsheltered camps per se, but they can have an effect on gang violence. And some appalling stats right now, 46% of our homicide victims are Black in the city where the population is 6%. This is a collective tragedy for us. Our most marginalized communities are the ones that are suffering the worst from our inability to confront violence. And so there's multi-factors to addressing that challenge. There's no easy fix, but the question is, what can we do tomorrow? Most immediately, January 1, 2023, gang violence specialists to intervene.
Thank you, Renee. Jessica.
Yeah, so this is something that is such a really important question. Even when crime was going down in other parts of the city or parts of the county, it was actually starting to increase in East Portland. And this has been something that I've been living with for a long time. In fact, in the summer of 2020, I actually witnessed a shooting in front of my house. So this is an issue that I have care very deeply about, both personally and as an elected official. You know, the county has a different role. We're not in charge of the Portland Police Department, but we do, the chair is in charge of the budget for the sheriff's department. And so as county chair, I'd work very closely with our new sheriff to make sure that they have the resources that they need, the funding that they need to do the recruitment to make sure that we are well staffed. We also, our sheriff's department also provides law enforcement support for some of our smaller cities in East County. And so in that way, we are very much providing very local public safety support. So I'll continue to make sure that we're doing that kind of investment, along with other investments that I've championed at the budget level for getting gun dispossession happening, so that we are removing the guns of people who have who have court orders so that they should no longer have those guns to make things more safe. Oh my gosh, 15 seconds. I think we also, just as an elected officials, need to provide the support and show our vocal support for our first responders, our police, our fire, our sheriff's departments officials. I feel like they haven't felt that they've had folks believing in them, and that's something I would absolutely do. And then continue to be making those upstream investments like I did last budget cycle with the village, where we're supporting micro organizations that do direct intervention with community members to help remove them from lives of where they might be engaged in criminal activity.
Thank you, Jessica. Sharon?
Thank you. As Jessica mentioned, the county has a bit of a different role when it comes to public safety, but we need to expand that role. We need a holistic system of public safety. And so from day one, I would be having the conversations with the city to bring together our law enforcement into the rest of the public safety system that the county oversees, so that we are combining those two and having an actual public safety system instead of the police, law enforcement, and everything else that goes into public safety. I would also address in LIPSIC, the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, where we don't talk about anything that actually has to do with the reality on our streets, the reality that people are facing right now, and make it real, where we are having those conversations and say, okay, we are facing this. What are we going to do? What are we going to do about it? Because all the players are at the table, but right now, I go to all those meetings. We get spoon-fed just these presentations that don't do anything, and it is not helping us. I would also address, in terms of the acuity, we need a workforce that is not, law enforcement getting the armed officers out there. It's going to take a year, 2 years, whatever. There's so many vacancies. We need a public safety workforce in the community. Rosemary Anderson High School and POIS, the Portland, I can't remember right now what the acronym stands for, but thank you so much, has a great system that will address public safety workers in community who can take some of these things on. We need a comprehensive, holistic approach, and I will leave that as chair.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that. I believe we've now gone through all four of you, correct? All right. As we bring it to a close, I want to make sure that I've got it in order. We're going to move on to the closing statements now, and thank each of you for that robust conversation and being very specific and substantive. I really wanted to get to the heart of some of those questions that we had. Regarding closing statements, we're going to start with you, Jessica, Sharon, Joanne, and Renee. Please start when you're ready.
Sure, thank you. So you are all here today because you care about this city, this county, and its people. We know that Multnomah County and the city of Portland need strong and bold leadership. We need leaders who understand the challenges our county faces, seize the path forward, and will weave together a coalition to meet this moment and create the change that we need. That is why I'm running for county chair, because that is what I've been doing right here in our community for the past 2 decades. And I have never done it alone. My leadership always starts with a broad table that includes communities most impacted by the issues at hand. In the next 4 years, Multnomah County needs to meet its challenges using proven, collaborative leadership. We're facing challenges of the size and the complexity that require it. Sharon touts her experience as an ER doctor, but her own former staff identified the problem. As an ER doctor, Sharon is great at diagnosing initial problems and talking about what's wrong, but terrible about the long-term follow-through. For the last 6 years, Sharon has literally had a seat at the table to shape our housing and homelessness response. We've passed 2 housing bonds, the Supportive Housing Services Measure, and 6 county budgets in that time, and she hasn't meaningfully contributed to shaping any of them. She has not earned the right to lead Multnomah County forward. The race for chair is one of the most critical on the ballot this November. We need a competent leader who is able to step in the job of running the 3rd largest government in the state on day one and tackle the work before us. From addressing the climate crisis to creating universal preschool, I have created systemic change at both the state and the local level. I have fought with tenacity to get things done, and I have never said I couldn't do anything because of the position that I've had. It's time? I have earned the support of many, and that is why I'm asking for your vote this November to be Multnomah County Chair.
Thank you, Jessica. Sharon?
How long do we have? I just want to
So secretly, I moved them to 90 seconds to get us
Oh.
on time. So
I practiced
just
a
to let you
2-minute
know, I
speech.
didn't
That's
want to
why I
throw
was
you
like,
off.
how am I out
That
of
last
time?
question, I'm looking at the clock and I can tell all the people behind me boring holes in my head that they want to get outside. So with
they
all
wanna
due
be
respect
here
to
for the
Jessica, I do
duration.
want to keep this to
Yep.
90 seconds.
Oh.
So with all due respect to
Yep.
you, Jessica, and the rest, please.
So, thank you. I am here running for chair because the core work of the county, health and human services, is my passion. It is my life's work where I've accomplished substantial things throughout the state as an ER doctor for decades before coming to the county and as a county commissioner. I'm not a career politician. I'm not looking for the next place that I'm going to go after county chair. As you can see from the accomplishments that I have done, the work I have done at the county, I have enhanced our system of alternative shelters. I've changed the narrative and brought these ideas to the table to expand shelter, reduce harm to people living outside, reduce harm to our communities in ways that have been passed in our budget, that have brought millions of dollars to changing our systems, to changing the way we even talk about shelter, so that my opponent is now saying alternative shelter, using the word urgency and shelter, which were never uttered before. So I am saying we do need to get things done, and I have gotten things done. I am working. It does benefit to be an ER doctor who gets things done and tackles emergencies. My opponent points to an accomplishment, getting a preschool initiative on the ballot. Right now, it is not succeeding. I would say the results right now are embarrassing. The proof will be in the pudding. But right now, we do not have those results. When we get them,
Thank you, Sharon.
that is a result. And I have gotten the results in the core work of the county, and I will do so as chair.
Thank you. Joanne?
I want to tell you, you're the most fabulous people on the planet. I can't believe you stayed in here in this beautiful sunny day. I am a fighter for working people in the city of Portland. I have used my expertise as a state legislator, as a county policymaker, and as a city council member to change lives for the better. Because I have been in this role and for a short period of time, we now have a new first responder that shows up with compassion and empathy and a soul to be helpful, right? I believe in Portland. I believe Portland will come back, and our greatest strength are the people in the city of Portland. You have worked with me to get some of the major policy changes through, and I will depend on you to help me continue to actually center working people and continue to make this a city where people at all income levels can thrive. I am not someone that's going to tell you one thing in one room and say something else in another room. Big money interests would never support me, but guess what? They have a lot of representation in elected office, right? What you need is a fighter for working people. That's why you sent me to City Hall. And in spite of a worldwide pandemic, racial justice movement worldwide, severe weather, cold, and heat, I have been there and I've done the job for you. And I would encourage you to please vote to allow me to continue to serve you as your Portland City Council member. I got 4 more years in me, and I'm ready to give it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Renee?
Just like to thank our host, Portland State Hatfield School of Government and the neighborhood associations, and thank you all for joining today on this beautiful day. I entered the race because our city's at a historic crisis in livability, and really the question before you for this seat is who you think can lead us best in the next 4 years as we confront these very difficult questions of crime, homelessness, and more fundamentally, what is the role of the city post-pandemic? We are facing real headwinds as a community in terms of where people want to live, where they want to build businesses. These are complex topics, some of which are going to transcend the immediate crisis. And so I'd leave before you that I've been a business leader, a nonprofit leader, more fundamentally, I'm a father of three Portland-born children. So I am deeply tied to our history. I am deeply vested in its future, and I would so appreciate your consideration when you vote in November. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Renee. And I would like to note the time, so we did have extra seconds, but it is beautiful out, and I think we need to be released from class early. It's a beautiful day. As I complete, thank you. As I complete this, I want to thank you for this privilege. Commissioner Vega Peterson, Commissioner Myron, Commissioner Hardesty, and Mr. Gonzalez. It's been my great pleasure. Thank you to the Portland State Hatfield School of Government and the 13 neighborhoods. The Portland Marathon is tomorrow, and your marathon ends in 5 weeks. So please, ballots drop very, very soon. Make sure that you do vote and get out and help the others understand the very important messages that we have to discuss in our community today. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.